The snows that should never have touched the crownlands had come early, riding the faltering breath of Viserion's icy wings. Wind swept through the city's crooked alleys, piling drifts against shuttered shop fronts, and erasing what little color remained in the cobbled streets. On the tallest parapet of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister stood alone in a thin gown of black velvet, her hands pressed to the chill, slick battlement. Frost had daubed her lashes silver. Still, she would not retreat. A queen did not hide from the world's ending. Below, King's Landing trembled on the brink of panic. Gold cloaks beat back refugees surging at the gates. Children wailed for bread that no wagons could bring, and in the harbor the royal fleet bobbed useless beneath a mantle of ice. Common sailors hacked in vain at rigging turned brittle as glass. Cersei watched it all. The despair, the stupidity, paralyzed by the knowledge that her realm's defenses amounted to torches and crossbows against a god of death. Qyburn's soft tread approached behind her, muffled by falling snow. "Your Grace," he murmured, sounding almost wistful. "The scouts return. The dead march by night and day both. They have passed Duskendale." Thou. Only 30 miles. She traced the line of the Rosby Road in her mind and felt a tremor stab her spine. "And the dragons?" "Two we have sighted," Qyburn said. "One greater shadow on the clouds and one lesser. Both breathe cold. It freezes men in their armor. No wildfire, no ballista bolts. No sellsword company could tame a monster that turned the living world to brittle shards." Jaime's face flashed before her eyes. His confession in the tower at Winterfell of fighting for the living and dying in the snow. The thought still tasted of betrayal. If he had stayed, if the North's folly had failed sooner, he would be at her side now, sword ready. Or so she told herself. She turned at last. "The Golden Company?" "Captain Strickland fears a rout if his men see the Wights at close quarters. He begs permission to garrison the walls, and nothing more. Cowards in gilded helms." Cersei's lips curled. "Tell him he may hold the mud gate, or he may die. Those are his choices. We hired elephants and got mice." Qyburn bowed, but in his pale eyes flickered something cautious. Pity, perhaps, or calculation. "As you command, Your Grace." He shuffled back through the archway, leaving her once more against the storm. Somewhere in the silent morass beyond the city, the Night King's cadence would be relentless. Crunch, drag, crunch, drag, an army of corpses pacing to that frozen rhythm. The distance between breaths seemed to shrink as she imagined it. The cold had a sound. She realized. A high crystalline ring, like a goblet struck in an empty hall. She cocked her head. No, that was not imagination. Faint but rising, the note trembled on the air, carrying from north of the Blackwater. Bells? No bell in the city rang so purely. She leaned forward and felt the parapet tremble. A crack rippled across the stone under her palms. She jerked back as a hairline fissure spidered along the Merlon and lifted a puff of ice crystals like white smoke. The bells were not bells at all. They were the music of stone succumbing to sudden, supernatural cold. And then she saw the beast. Viserion swooped from the clouds, his dead eyes blazing blue, jaws yawning wide. A roar of perfect silence erupted. The absence of life, the vacancy of every hearth. His wings blotted half the sky. He banked once, twice, and exhaled a torrent of shimmering pallor that crashed against the river's surface. Water glazed to ice in an instant, spreading outward in a web of white veins, and the masts of anchored ships groaned as their hulls fused to the new-made crust. Every part of her screamed to run, to hide, to call for the mountain. But the queen's knees locked, rebellious, and she could only stare. The dragon alighted upon the frozen river like some colossal gull, talons cracking through mere inches of ice, where fathoms of current had churned moments before. Upon his spine rode a figure of night. The Night King sat motionless, spear of black glass braced in one hand, his armor glittering with frost. He dismounted without urgency and strode toward the riverbank, each step birthing new frost flowers that crawled over water and stone alike. Behind him, a tide of dead spilled from the gloom, ranks of spearmen and rotted mail, barefoot children with gaping wounds, pale women in torn silks dragging axes. The sight of them marching across an ice road that had not existed a heartbeat before stole the breath from her lungs. She turned at last to flee. But a voice spoke. Stay. It was not Qyburn's. Nor Euron's. Only one man had ever been fool enough to command her so bluntly. Rage flared brighter than the cold. She pivoted, ready to spit fire, and found Sandor Clegane looming in the doorway. The hound's scarred face glistened with flakes. If you run, your lot'll trample each other and waste what time we've got. Let them see their queen standing. You are no king to order me. Do I look like your brother? He snapped. I'm telling you a hard truth. He's coming, and walls won't matter. Stand here. Let them see you. Make them believe it isn't over until it is. Then turn. She nearly struck him. But in the courtyard below, the Ironborn held torches to barrels of pitch, and the Golden Company bristled in gleaming ranks. Eyes tracked the queen upon her lonely tower. Some sought courage there. Others doubt. If she quit this high place now, panic would unravel the silk thread holding the city's heart together. Cersei inhaled the knife-sharp air and held herself erect. Fine. Die where you like, dog. But do not speak again. Sandor grunted and leaned his bulk against the archway. Though he left her the parapet, his shadow overlapped hers, as if to lend solidity by force. The minutes stretched. Drums of hooves echoed against the stone as Strickland's outriders maneuvered on the Rosby Road. But when the first riders crested the rise, they did not wear the Golden Company's yellow cloaks. They wore none at all. Saddles frozen to blue-white legs, their mounts torn half-rotten, they charged without banners, a grisly vanguard. Arrows flew. Torches flared. Yet every shaft that struck a rider lodged in flesh already numb to pain. The dead hurled themselves at the spears planted before the gate of the gods, bodies piling into a macabre burned knoll. Others clawed at mortar until fingernails split like porcelain. Cersei's hand tightened on the crenel. The assault had begun, and the dragon had not yet moved. The Night King was content to watch, probing, measuring. Qyburn returned with Sir Gregor stalking behind him. The scorpions are ready, he reported. But the coils seize in the cold. 3 already crack. Use the ones that remain, she said. Aim for the rider, not the beast. Break him, and the rest will fall. Nendamantaro. Qyburn nodded, but the worry in his face darkened. He had expected some defiant jest from her, perhaps, or at least a shred of optimism. Cersei offered none, for she felt none. In that moment, even lies deserted her. The Night King advanced at last. Viserion's enormous head dipped, and a second plume of frost thundered toward the mud gate. The iron-bound doors crystallized in a heartbeat, their hinges shrieking loud enough to rattle her teeth. Another breath, and the gates exploded into glittering shards. Dead surged through the breach as if loosed from a pen. Somewhere beneath the tower, bells clanged frantic dissonance. Panic shrilled along every street. Light vanished as clouds thickened, and snowfall redoubled until torches guttered. The queen watched the city she had clutched so fiercely dissolve in a white maelstrom. And she knew a choice loomed. If the Night King could not be halted, and plainly, he could not, the question became whether she would bow or burn. Could an immortal shade be bargained with? The thought was abhorrent. But survival trumped all. Jaime had once warned her that living beats dying, even for a queen. And what was a queen of ash? She rounded on Qyburn. Send envoys, she ordered. White banners. Offer him the city if he spares us. Sandor laughed, a sound like gravel in a drum. Dragonslayer talk that. Offer him a city of corpses more like. She ignored him. Go, she snapped. Take clerks, whoever will speak the great tongue, or the old tongue, or whatever filth he mouths. Find out what he wants. Qyburn hesitated. Your Grace, I doubt he parleys. He will if he wants the throne unbroken. She hissed. Even monsters relish trophies. A tremor jolted the tower. Cersei steadied herself just as masonry cracked near the base. Blue firelight licked upward, flashing like lightning through windows. The Night King had entered the courtyard. "He's here," Sandor muttered, hand closing around the haft of an axe he had taken from some fallen sellsword. "You can't bribe ice." Cersei's breath steamed as she whispered, "Watch me." The grand doors of the throne room stood ajar, rimed with frost. Inside, the last torches had died, leaving the hall bathed in dusky gloom. Cersei crossed the threshold alone. Even the mountain, for all his obedience, balked at the uncanny cold pouring from the heart of the Red Keep. She insisted. A queen met her fate beneath her own roof. The Iron Throne loomed, its spines glittering with frozen dew. Beneath it, the Night King waited, silent, spear resting against one knee like a scepter. No courtiers flanked him, save the pale shadows of dead Lannister guards kneeling in a ragged semicircle. Cersei's pulse hammered, but she forced herself forward until only 10 paces separated them. "You invade my realm," she said, voice steady. "You slaughter my soldiers, freeze my people. Why?" The Night King's head tilted. No breath plumed from his mouth. Nothing lived inside that shell of ice. "You want the throne," she pressed. "Take it. But you need a queen to hold it, a line to rule in your name. Bend the knee, and I will give you what these fools never could. Unity." Her words faded. From the dark chasm beyond the raised dais came the sound of chain links scraping. A hand burst from shadow, a pale, delicate hand, skin drawn tight over bone. Another figure emerged, draped in tatters of once fine cloth. A girl of 10 and 3, hair hanging in icy ropes, eyes blazing blue. One of Sansa Stark's sisters, perhaps, or some northern maid dredged from the Barrow Downs. The girl glided to the Night King's side and knelt. He laid a hand on the child's crown with terrifying tenderness, and something like pity flickered through Cersei's chest, sharp as the wind. "You already have servants," she conceded. "But they are children, corpses. I offer cunning, rule by fear, loyalty bought with gold. I offer—" Wordless, the Night King rose. His gaze bored into hers. He stepped down among the weapons of the dead and closed the distance with spectral grace. He smelled of winter storms. Cersei swallowed. "Do you understand me?" No answer. He lifted a hand and touched her cheek. Ice bit deep, skin cracked like glazed porcelain. She gasped, but stood her ground, refusing to cower. The blue fire of his gaze burned into her very marrow, and behind its chill she perceived a fathomless ache, older than any song. The weight of millennia pressed upon her. Ruined oaths, slaughtered children, a love lost to wildfire long before Aegon's conquest. In that instant she understood. The Night King did not conquer for sport or hunger. He sought reunion, a wholeness stolen by death. The throne, the cities, the crowns were meaningless. He wanted a queen, yes, but not one who schemed and lied. One who would share eternity's silence. A moan escaped her lips, half sob, half plea. Suddenly, the notion of bending the knee seemed absurd. Thrones and banners and debts of gold shriveled beside the vastness of his sorrow. She had known grief, children torn from her arms, a father left cold, but the depth inside this creature dwarfed her pain. It consumed everything. The Night King's fingers slipped to her throat. Neither cruel nor tender, the gesture simply was. Veins beneath her skin stiffened to crystal. A hush fell, as though the hall itself held its breath. Her vision wavered, edges rhymed with hoarfrost. Heartbeats slowed until they were echoes fading in a distant cave. Yet she did not fight. Some dim spark of will recognized a truth. Here was the end she had courted all her life, chasing power to fill an unquenchable void. Now power reached back, absolute and merciless, promising an end to want. A perfect stillness. A wife to the winter. Her last human tear froze upon her cheek as the cold advanced into her lungs. Air shattered there, ribs cracked. In the distance she heard a crash, perhaps Sir Gregor battering doors, perhaps Sandor screaming. None of it mattered. She was sinking beneath an ocean of silence. And in that silent sea she saw bright shapes drifting. Joffrey laughing too loud at a feast, Myrcella weaving daisies into Jaime's beard, Tommen chasing pigeons across the courtyard, a golden lion banner snapping above the rock, her mother's gentle hand smoothing her hair. All pale ghosts, rising in farewell. Then the world went white. The rush of wings stirred banners above the shattered roof. Sandor Clegane, breaking at last through the twisted doors, skidded to a halt on the slope of corpses. His torch guttered, painting the scene in lurid orange. The Night King seated upon the iron throne, impassive, and beside him a queen of ice. Cersei Lannister. No, not Cersei. Her skin shone translucent, veins glowing faint cerulean. In those once green eyes blazed the same unholy sapphire as her new king. Snow dusted her pale hair. She turned that gaze upon the intruder, and the hound felt fear unlike any fire. Yet some fragment of the woman lingered, for her lips parted in a wry, almost amused curl. She spoke a single word, voice ringing like crystal struck. "Kneel." Outside bells ceased. The storm lulled. And in the city's hushed heart, every living soul felt the temperature fall yet further, felt hope crack and break under the burden of a frozen dawn. The Night King had found his bride. G-N-G. A hush like burial cloths wrapped the city once the Night King crowned his bride. Snow buried the broad avenues more quickly than masons could raise barricades, muting hoofbeats, swallowing screams, covering blood with quiet white veils. Morning never came. A permanent twilight settled, lit only by torches that sputtered and died. Then blue witch flame rekindled in the sockets of corpses. Sandor Clegane fled that throne room of ice and silence in a stumbling fury. He hacked apart 2 dead Lannister guards who lurched at him in the Serpentine Gallery, kicked down a squire he had sworn once to protect, and kept running until his lungs felt scorched. Steel rang through the maiden vault. Somewhere a lion banner toppled with the crack of freezing silk. By the time he reached the stables, half the horses were already down, their steaming breath stilled. He seized a remaining dapple gray, cut the reins free, and galloped through a postern, without knowing to where. Only away from that ghastly sapphire stare that had once belonged to the proudest woman in the 7 kingdoms. 2 leagues south of the city he found the river Blackwater frozen clear to its muddy bed. Bodies lay trapped beneath the glassy crust. Oarsmen, women who had attempted to flee by skiff, even a young maester clutching scroll cases that fanned like parchment wings in the water. Sandor's Grey balked at the sight and nearly threw him. He cursed, wheeled the beast, and spurred it hard along the Rosby Road, seeking any ember of warmth or life that had not yet guttered out. On Dragonstone, Tyrion Lannister stood on a parapet facing the dark eastern sea, mind racing faster than the gulls that whirled overhead. Raven after raven arrived out of the cold north, and the colder crownlands burning the same dire news onto parchment. The dead had breached the capital. The queen was taken. The rivers ran solid as iron. Every instinct told him to drown his despair in wine, but the cask fires were long cold, and there was no time. He clenched numb fingers around the message ribbon and hurried to the great hall, where Daenerys paced before the carved map table like a tigress with a thorn in her paw. Another raven? She snapped before he spoke, eyes blazing from sleepless hollows. "The crownlands are gone, your majesty," Tyrion said. "The Night King rides Viserion, and he has turned my sister." Those silver brows quirked. Turned? As he did Viserion. Only this time, he wanted a queen. The words tasted like ash. Cersei now sits an icy twin beside him upon the throne. Daenerys fell still. Her face, drawn with grief for children unborn, for a broken northern alliance, for the fall of Winterfell weeks earlier, hardened into something colder than grief. Resolve. "Then the Iron Throne is lost," she said softly. "Unless Drogon and Rhaegal, burn it clean. She traced a finger over the map, sliding from Dragonstone to King's Landing. If the citadel has frozen, wildfire alone may still ignite. There are stores hidden under the streets. Tyrion's stomach nodded. You would torch 500,000 smallfolk along with the dead. What life remains in that city, imp? The title held no scorn, merely exhaustion. If Viserion's frost has choked the wells and buried the granaries, they are dead already or soon to be. Better they find quick flame than eternal servitude in the Night King's ranks. Now, he heard Cersei's voice echoing from some far memory. Burn them all, and felt a shiver. We must be certain. My brother may still live. Daenerys looked away. Your brother marched north and never returned. Jaime has cheated every death set before him. If he lives, he will come for her. Tyrion met the queen's eyes. And if any fragment of my sister endures inside that shell, Jaime alone might reach it. Daenerys sighed. Very well. We fly at dawn. I will see King's Landing with my own eyes. If it is beyond hope, we burn. If not. She let the thought dangle like a noose. Rhaegal shuddered against stone outside, restless, sensing his undead brother's nearness. Drogon dozed, but smoke curled from his nostrils. Tyrion felt smaller than ever beneath their black wings. Jaime Lannister did live. He rode south with Brienne of Tarth at his flank, 30 surviving Northmen behind, and a smear of guilt dark as old blood inside his chest. They had escaped Winterfell's fall when the Night King's first assault shattered the ramparts. Melisandre's fire had bought hours, not victory. The shattered remnants of Jon Snow's host scattered like leaves in a storm. Ghost stories drifted across the frost-bitten fields. Arya fallen. Jon fled to the God's Eye. Bran vanished into some green's ear trance no one could rouse. Jaime prayed none were true. On the King's Road's frozen ruts they met Sandor Clegane galloping like a man pursued by devils. The grey nearly bowled Brienne aside before Jaime caught its bridle. The Queen, Sandor panted, eyes wild. She's blue as winter, sittin' with him on the throne. Dead guards everywhere, couldn't stay. He spat ice crystals. And the mountain. Fuck, Jaime, your monster's worse now, full of the Night King's power. Brienne laid a hand on his shoulder. Come with us. We'll need your sword. To do what? Can't kill ice with steel. Only dragonglass works and Valyrian. Jaime glanced at the sword on his hip. Sister blade to Brienne's, both forged from ice, Ned Stark's greatsword melted by Tywin's command. We have Valyrian. He met Sandor's dark eyes. Come. For the girl you tried to save, for Sansa Stark. If she lives, she rides with those dead. A puppet. Will you let that stand? Bender. Clegane swore again, but he turned his horse. Lead on, pretty boy. The ragged company pressed toward Blackwater Bay, skirting hamlets where every door hung open and snow sifted over bodies in bedclothes. Night brought no rest. The sky glimmered with cold green lights, the aurora of some terrible sorcery. Jaime forced thoughts of his sister from his mind, yet every mile south tightened a cord around his heart. He had sworn to kill her once to save thousands. Could he still? Would the White Queen even recognize him? In King's Landing, the Night King wasted no time. Viserion's frost breath sealed each gate, hemming survivors within a city that had become its own tomb. Wights stacked stones into silent cairns upon the walls, fashioning grotesque watchtowers. Beneath the throne room, in the vaults where Ares had hoarded wildfire, blue flames flickered among the jars as the mountain. Sir Robert Strong no longer lifted casks like toys and carried them upward by the Night King's unspoken command. The beast of zombie flesh would turn Mad King's fire to winter's weapon. Cersei walked those vaults at her new lord's side, bare feet whispering on ice-slick stairs, white gown trailing frost. At moments her head cocked, as though hearing voices only half remembered. Once she paused before a cracked mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman she had been. A glimmer of amber flicked in her blue gaze, then died like a candle in wind. From the rafters, Qyburn spied, cloaked in shadows, heart-hammering. He alone preserved warm blood within the Red Keep, tolerated by the Night King for reasons the Master of Whispers could not guess. Perhaps even monsters found curiosity useful. He watched his queen, his masterpiece, glide away. She was flawless and terrible. Yet in the silence he whispered to himself, "A mind still turns those cogs. I must find the lever." Dawn never broke when Drogon's silhouette swept above Blackwater Bay. Instead, a fiery glow cut the frozen gloom. His belly flame bathed the ice sheet in molten gold, carving open channels that hissed and steamed. Rhaegal followed, roaring challenge. The ships frozen into the bay cracked apart as waves heaved. On Drogon's back, Daenerys scoured the city with furious eyes. She saw the frost-wreathed spires, the corpses stacked as barricades around Flea Bottom, the blue torches atop Beller's Sept, and the shrieking mobs of living smallfolk chased through snow by child wights. She banked lower, heart splintering, and fire burst from Drogon's throat, sweeping the street clear of dead to give those ragged souls a chance to scatter into alleys. Stone shattered, windows burst, but the Dragonslayer Queen cared only for life. She circled again, searching for any sign of her undead brother. Instead, she saw the Red Keep crowned in rime, and on the highest tower 2 figures. The Night King unbowed by flame, and beside him a woman in ice whiteness. Tyrion, clinging to a harness behind her, groaned. "Seven, save us. He's made my sister his corpse bride." Rhaegal's answering screech told of grief and rage, but also fear. Viserion rose from the courtyard like a specter, frost trailing from torn wings, and at his back the Night King leapt astride. The 2 dragons wheeled in midair, undead blue fire colliding with living red. Steam billowed, fell as sleet. The battle of sky and frost began anew. Daenerys urged Drogon higher. "We slay the rider, the dead fall." She shouted into the gale. "Hold, my children, hold." But Viserion's unnatural speed sent shards of ice raking across Drogon's flank. Scales cracked, blood hissed. Tyrion's fingers slipped from the rigging. He plummeted, tumbling through whipping snow, hit an icy roof that exploded beneath his weight, and slid unconscious into darkness. Tyrion woke, coughing blood into frost-dusted tiles. Bells tolling. Shapes moved overhead, men and women dragging chains. A voice whispered near his ear, frantic. "We must hide, my lord. They come again." Missandei, cheeks hollow, lifted him to his feet. Somehow, she had survived Winterfell beside Grey Worm, and a handful of Unsullied, now barricaded in the ruins of Magister Illyria's old manse. Tyrion's head spun. "Dany?" he croaked. In the sky still, the dragons clash, but the queen cannot break through the frost storm around the castle. Missandei pressed a cloth to his bleeding scalp. "We send riders to open the Rosby Gate, but ice blocks every hinge." Tyrion steadied himself. Across the river, the King's Road snaked silver under moonlight, for day and night had blurred. If Jaime marched that road, he would reach the walls by noon, or what passed for noon in frozen dusk. A dim spark kindled. Perhaps fate had not abandoned all hope. "Take me to Grey Worm," he said. "We will open a way for them." Under the walls, Qyburn found Sandor Clegane again, this time hacking at black ice with a pickaxe pilfered from the cellars. The hound growled, but let the old leech come near. "I thought you'd fled, maester," Sandor sneered. "I am no maester," Qyburn reminded with a faint smile. "And I flee nowhere. My queen lives." "That thing ain't your queen." "Perhaps she is more so now than ever, wholly without mercy." He knelt, feeling the ice for cracks. "But she remembers me. She allows me passage. With the right words, she may recall other bonds." Sandor spat. "You think to charm the dead?" "I intend to unlock Cersei of House Lannister from the Night King's chain." Qyburn produced a small phial, swirling with wildfire. Ages passed. The children of the forest bound humans and others with spells of dragonglass and blood. My arts dabble in similar humors. If we turn her back even for an instant, she might strike the Night King when he least expects. The hound eyed the vial. "Or blow us all to ash. Either is preferable to endless winter." Qyburn's smile grew. "Help me reach the throne room." Sandor considered, then gripped the pickaxe. I want the mountain. Turning him loose on me was her last crime. I'll end him, and you get your chance. Agreement struck. As dawnless day waned, Jaime's column reached the Blackwater's eastern bank. Hearing dragon cries and seeing the sky alight with bursts of steam, Jaime's heart hammered. We go now, he told Brienne. Under the walls. Through the sally port behind the dragon pit. Brienne clasped his arm. If we fail, what rises after us will be worse. He looked into her honest blue eyes and knew she meant Cersei too. I must try. They slipped across the reforming ice at Low Bend, cut through the charred husks of hovels Drogon's fire had cleansed, and reached the old sally port, only to find it encased in crystal. Northmen hammered uselessly until Brienne drew Oathkeeper and struck the lock. Valyrian steel bit. Fractures spread like spider webs. Again. Marks flying. On the fifth blow, the ice shattered inward. Inside the winding corridor, one torch remained. They dared not light more. Jaime followed its guttering glow to the dungeons beneath the Tower of the Hand, where he had once freed Tyrion. Echoes crawled on the damp walls. Each step felt like trespass upon memory. At the stairwell mouth, they found Grey Worm and a squad of Unsullied. Spears dipped, but Grey Worm recognized Brienne's voice. Tyrion? Jaime asked breathlessly. He lives, Grey Worm said. He coordinates pockets of small folk near the Great Sept ruins. He seeks you, Kingslayer. Lead us. They threaded narrow imperial passageways, silent as ghosts among ghosts. Now and again a lone wight lurched into view. A seamstress dragging broken needles, a sellsword's severed arm still grasping sword hilt, but silent steel put each down. Ice spidered across ceilings. Breath smoked, and always farther ahead the faint blue glow that betrayed proximity to the throne. Above, dragons still clashed. Viserion shrieks shook icicles loose down every street. Drogon battered him with wings, raking talons. Rhaegal soared for his flank. Yet each time flame neared, a chill wind snuffed half its fury. Blue conflagrations met red, clouds billowed in bruised purples. Civilians cowered beneath archways, as scales rained like knives. Daenerys felt her children tiring, hearts hammering. The Night King did not fatigue. A war horn rose through the din, deep, contorted. From the docks, a flotilla of wights rode skiffs of frozen wood upriver, bearing barrels banded in wildfire green iron. Dany's eyes widened. He means to flood the city with it. She wheeled Drogon, bellowing at Rhaegal. Burn those boats. But Viserion barred the path, eyes twin beacons. His death-cold breath washed over Drogon. Flames sputtered. Dany clung to smoked leather, teeth chattering despite searing heat beneath her. Fight, she hissed. For Rhaegar, for Viserion, for the realm. Viserion lunged, jaws wide. Drogon twisted, seized undead throat in his own. Rhaegal dove, crunching wings between teeth. Blue blood spurted onto rooftops, freezing mid-spray. With a collective roar, the living dragons tore flesh from corpse hide. The Night King raised his spear, but a glimmer in the corner of his eye made him pause, sensing a crack in the weave of magic below. Qyburn and Sandor entered the throne room from opposite doors. Night blue fire bathed iron blades in corpse light. The mountain stood before his masters like a sentinel statue. Qyburn swallowed terror and stepped forward, arms raised. My queen, he said, bowing low, I serve you beyond death. Will you let me kneel one last time? Cersei, white Cersei, regarded him, head tilting. The Night King's gaze followed. Qyburn uncorked his phial. Green wildfire glittered. Once you asked if I could make you deathless. Now I see death is no prison for your majesty. Yet you were born to rule in life, not as puppet. He slashed his palm over the vial's lip. Blood mingled with wildfire. The liquid hissed, then glowed vivid violet. The Night King stirred, wary. Frost rippled outward. Sandor stalked behind the mountain. Remember me, you ugly fuck. He hefted a half-moon axe. The mountain turned. Blue eyes, blank as the sea at night, locked on his brother. No breath, no taunt. He raised a mace the size of a child's coffin. Axes and maces met with bone-splintering shock. Sandor felt his shoulder jolt to numbed pulp, but pressed, hacking at greaves. Sparks lit. Why? The mountain swung in murderous arcs, pillars cracked beneath missed blows. Each hit echoed like giant heartbeats shaking dust from vaulted ribs. Qyburn meanwhile advanced within arm's reach of Cersei. "Hear me," he whispered. "Your children call. Joffrey demands you punish the thief who stole his crown. Myrcella weeps. Tommen asks after Serpounds." His own blood dripped onto ice like red teardrops. The vial pulsed. For a heartbeat, Cersei's pupils flared gold within blue. Her lips parted. The Night King's spear flashed. Qyburn's chest burst open as obsidian pierced heart. Wildfire blood mixture sprayed the queen's face, smoking on her skin. The Night King withdrew the spear and flung the corpse aside, turning now on Sandor. But the mountain hesitated mid-blow, helm sliding askew as if gears jammed. Sandor seized the chance. Slammed Valyrian dagger, gift from Arya Stark, through one blue eye. The mountain convulsed, dropped the mace, seized the hound's throat. Cersei screamed. The wail was human, raw, shattering the frozen hush. The Night King's gaze snapped to her. Gold fought blue in her eyes. Cracks raced across the icy mask of her skin, revealing flushed flesh beneath in jagged stripes. She staggered, mind warring inside. Sandor, choking, kicked free, yanked dagger out, buried it a second time in the monster's ear. The mountain fell, body jerked by invisible strings. And across the hall, the Night King faltered. At that moment, Jaime burst through the side arch, Brienne at his side. His heart stopped. Cersei, half ice, half woman, hair like snowfall in sunlight, saw him, and tears, true liquid tears, slid in twin tracks melting frost along her cheeks. "Jaime," she breathed. He crossed the distance unaware of the Night King leveling obsidian spear. Brienne saw and shoved him aside, her sword intercepting with a shriek, as bitter cold leapt along the Valyrian edge. Steel sang, but Oathkeeper held. The Night King drew back, preparing fatal thrust. Jaime lunged behind Brienne, golden hand clutching dragonglass dagger. Arya had pressed into his palm before leaving Winterfell. He plunged the blade into the Night King's flank. Ice exploded. Blue light flared blinding. The spear clattered. But the ancient sorcery did not shatter entirely. Instead, great cracks crazed the Night King's torso like tempered crystal, stopping just short of the heart. He turned on Jaime, eyes furious storms. Cersei screamed again, but this time words. "No!" In a burst of living strength she seized the Night King's arm, prying him away. They grappled, queen and king, death and half-life, shards of ice cascading. Brienne slashed his back. Sandor staggered upright to hack at cracked plates. Jaime pushed to feet, took Oathkeeper's twin blade from Brienne, Widow's wail, and together they drove Valyrian steel through the Night King's breast. With a sound like glaciers calving, the Night King burst into snow. Fragments spiraled up so gently a child could have chased them. Silence fell, until throughout the city the same shattering echoed as every Wight collapsed. Strings cut. Cersei sank to her knees, color surging into her cheeks, breath returning in ragged sobs. Frost melted from her lashes. Jaime cradled her. "It is done," he said, unbelieving. "No," she whispered, staring at her hands, at skin still half translucent. "He changed me. The winter remains in my blood." Tears dripped. The wildfire, beneath the streets. He meant to ignite it with cold fire. Stop it. Jaime kissed her brow. "We will." But in the vaults, abandoned casks cracked from prior blue flame. Volatile neon vapors licked stone, seeking spark. In the harbor, Barrels the Wights had ferried drifted through shattered ships, fluids seeping. Tyrion, rallying small folk from the Sept ruins, smelled sharp acrid scent carried on wind and knew doom. He ordered every able body to the dragon pit, the vast open ruin least likely to channel wildfire's fury. Bells rang again, warning this time. Above, Daenerys, sensing the Night King's fall through Drogon's triumphant bellow, guided the dragons downward. Flames no longer met frost. Viserion's corpse plummeted as living heads rose victorious. She spotted Tyrion waving frantically from Sept steps and swooped. "Wildfire," he shouted over gusts. "The damn jars will blow. The bay too. We must lift them away, or this city burns worse than Ares dreamed." Then too. Dragons could not carry barrels too fragile to clamp. They could only burn or freeze. A thought struck Tyrion. Melt the ice, flood the streets, drown the wildfire before it finds air. Daenerys nodded. She commanded Rhaegal to tear aqueduct towers on Aegon's Hill. Torrents poured, cataracts roaring through alleys. Drogon carved canals through ice crust to Blackwater's thawed channels. Water rushed, doused green flickers that flared. In the throne room, Cersei watched liquid seep beneath doors. She shivered, feeling heat for first time since transformation. Steam curled from her skin where wildfire blood had burned. "I must leave," she said faintly. Jaime held tighter. "With me." Sandor leaned on shattered mace haft, eyeing dying mountain. "Get clear, Lannisters. Stone's coming down." Brienne guided Cersei. Jaime followed, swords sheathed. They stumbled into corridor where Grey Worm formed rearguard. Water gushed knee-deep now, sluicing charred bones. As they climbed the narrow stair to Maegor's Holdfast, a final detonation roared in the vaults below. Stones split. Flames belched, but drowned quickly in flooding tunnels. The shock threw them against walls, but the castle stood. Dawn, true dawn, broke at last. Clouds parted to reveal pale sun cresting over distant narrow sea. Snowflakes still fell, yet they glittered like innocent motes rather than death's ash. Dragon wings hovered above the red keep. Daenerys landed in the courtyard now littered with thawing corpses. Tyrion trotted beside, face blackened but grinning against odds. They met Jaime's group amid rubble. Brienne bowed. Grey Worm presented Daenerys to the resurrected Queen of Westeros and her twin. Words failed them. Cersei's eyes, once green, now swirled gold, streaked with faintest blue as though ice left residue in amber. She regarded the Dragon Queen with exhausted curiosity. "I owe you my life," she managed. "I thought to end it an hour ago," Daenerys replied. "Perhaps we may yet end old quarrels instead." Cersei could only nod, tears wet on warm cheeks. Tyrion stepped forward between his sovereigns. "We have endured ice, fire, and father's ghost. Let us bury them all this day." He gestured to surrounding devastation. "The realm needs hands to rebuild, not claws to rend." He eyed his siblings. "And you, sister, must stand trial for many crimes. Yet you also saved countless by warning of wildfire." Cersei met Jaime's gaze. Fear, love, defiance. But her shoulders slumped as if decades' weight lifted. "I will answer," she whispered. "But first, find my children. Let me see them laid to rest." She glanced toward throne room, ruined vault. "Free them from that cold." Jaime pressed her hand. Snowflakes melted on their skin. Weeks later, the small folk emerged from cellars to find crocuses breaking icy mud along the Street of Sisters. Sun rose and set again. Coastal winds carried spring salt instead of doom. Dragonstone fleets brought grain. High garden wagons rumbled north, Tyrell banners flapping though Lord Tarley ruled the Reach now. Winter had not ended. Maesters argued it might linger 2 more years. But the endless night broke. Cersei was confined to chambers in the sept of the dragon pit, guarded less by spears than by healers who studied lingering chill in her veins. Some nights she woke gasping from dreams of empty thrones, and heard distant cracks of ice within her pulse. Other nights she wept for Joffrey as if he had died yesterday, not seasons past. Yet each morning, she opened shutters to sunlight and forced breath to her lungs. Daenerys held council in the scorched throne room's shell. Open to sky, the ruined Iron Throne removed. She spoke of rebuilding, not ruling. Of granaries, roads, orphan hostels. Tyrion wrote letters to Dorne, to the Iron Islands, to the shattered north, promising bread and justice if they sent men to quarry stone instead of lift sword. In the God's Wood of the Red Keep, saplings of weirwood and olives took root in thawed earth where Ice and Oathkeeper were planted upright like twin guardians. Brienne vowed to stand sentinel until the North sent new Stark to claim them. Jaime visited his sister each sunset. Once he asked if she regretted anything. She answered, "I regret so much I cannot bear the list, but above all, trusting fear more than love." She touched his missing hand, kissed the cool golden fingers, and smiled faintly. "I am still cold inside, but for you I will try to thaw." Far north, at the Isle of Faces, Jon Snow stood beside Bran Stark. The last Greenseer opened clouded eyes. "The song has changed," Bran said softly. "But the Night King was not the only verse of winter. Another storm will come, in time." Jon watched ravens wheel above green water. "Then let the realms of men be ready, united." Bran's gaze traveled southward, as though through walls, mountains, hearts. "They will be, for a while. A lioness reborn in frost and a dragon queen tempered by mercy carve a new refrain." He smiled the faint, distant smile of those who had seen endings beyond mortal sight. "For now, brother, rest. Spring will need your sword again." Jon closed his eyes, hearing waves lap, feeling sunlight, a warmth long absent, and allowed himself a single breath of peace. In King's Landing the first crocus unfurled fully, tips brushing a fallen shard of the Iron Throne, half melted into soil. No one noticed, save a street urchin chasing butterflies. He crouched, plucked the shard, and wondered if it could fetch a copper. He left the flower standing. It trembled in mild breeze, roots steady even in ruined earth, proof that after longest winter, life insists upon itself, fragile yet indomitable, bright against the shadows of ice and fire. The moon of the 12th week after the fall of the Night King swam like a cracked pearl above King's Landing, casting runnels of milk-pale light across a city that still felt half-ghost. Snow no longer lay in sheets, yet every rooftop wore a faint dusting that never quite melted, as though memory itself clung to the slate. Rats had multiplied in the quiet, feasting on stores spoiled by frost, and the bell ringers complained that the iron in their clappers had gone brittle. Even at midday a lingering chill prowled the alleys and eddies, slipping under shutters and between the ribs of beggars too poor for blankets. People called it the Queen's breath, and they shivered whenever the wind swung off the ruins of the Red Keep, where frost still patterned the stones in spider-silk whorls. Inside the vast scaffolding that ringed the shattered throne room, masons worked by torchlight, their hammers echoing along vaults open to the sky. A giant timber cradle encompassed the place where the Iron Throne had once perched. The twisted mass of swords lay fragmented at its foot, jagged shards, some no larger than a dagger's point, others the length of a man's arm, waiting to be carted to the foundries at Rosby. Under the Queen Regent's edict, those shards would be reforged into plowshares and bridge rivets. No one had yet dared call her by name in any proclamation. To the quills of scribes, Cersei was simply the Lady of Lannisport, currently remanded. Still, the city whispered her true titles, whenever the air turned strange. Jaime Lannister paced outside the throne room in what had once been the gallery of the Kingsguard, accompanied by the slow toll of a bell far below. Each peal measured out a pulse of dread. He rested his golden fingers on the rail and watched the candles gutter. 24 steps away, a trio of unsullied in black enameled mail blocked the doorway to the improvised courtroom. Beyond those spears, Tyrion argued before the Queen's hand and the assembled lords that his treasonous sister, newly resurrected from ice, deserved mercy. Jaime could not hear the words, only the rhythms. Tyrion's quick, incisive cadence, then the deeper murmur of Lord Davos, speaking for the northern bannermen, a pause for translation into Dothraki, and finally the even softer voice of Daenerys Targaryen herself, calm as a lake that held hidden currents. Brienne stood beside Jaime, male half hidden by a wool surcoat dyed the dark green of Tarth. Even in torch glow she seemed cut from sunrise. They had not spoken in an hour, but her nearness anchored him to reality. "Your brother fights well," she said at last, a gentle reminder of hope. "I have never doubted Tyrion's tongue," Jaime answered. "It's Cersei's that troubles me." He pictured her inside the hall, sitting at a tall-backed cherrywood chair where the defendants of lesser trials would stand on bare boards. They had given her a blanket, but she never used it. The chill still suited her skin. Whether the night's outcome proved life or death, Jaime's heart could no longer tell which he feared more. When the doors finally grated open, a hush swept the corridor. Tyrion emerged first, face gray with exhaustion, then caught his brother's eyes and inclined his head. Not victory, not defeat, only inevitability. Behind him walked Cersei unbound, two unsullied flanking her but not touching. She wore a gown of deep crimson, one borrowed from the Tyrell wardrobes and taken in at the waist, for the months of captivity had etched bone into her figure. No crown graced her hair. She had bound it back in a simple twist. "Jaime," she greeted, voice low. A frost plume coiled from her lips, though the corridor's fires burned warm. He bowed, a gesture half ceremonial, half desperate. "What says the council?" "The Queen spares my life," Cersei replied. "On conditions." Tyrion rubbed at his eyes. "House Lannister will forfeit 50,000 gold dragons to succor small folk displaced by the long night. The lands around Casterly Rock will accept royal surveyors to reconstruct their tax ledgers. And, most important for our sister," he added, "she must leave King's Landing by sunrise and reside in exile until the realm judges her heart thawed." "Exile where?" Brienne asked. "A ship leaves Blackwater Bay within the hour," Tyrion said. "Its captain has orders to bear her and any single escort she chooses to Oldtown, where the Archmaesters will study the residual frost in her blood. Dragonstone funds the code of hospitality. Oldtown, a gilded cage, but a far cry from the headsman's block most lords demanded." Jaime exhaled a shaky relief. Yet Cersei's gaze did not rest on him. "To the oaked past, to the open night where snowflakes wandered. Oldtown will not help." She murmured. And in the timbre of her voice, Jaime heard something like prophecy. "I can feel the wind even through stone." The storm has retreated, not ended. A silence spread. Then Lord Davos stepped from the courtroom. "Sir Jaime," he said in that plain, salt rough accent, "Her Grace would speak to you before she grants the escort." Jaime offered his arm to Cersei. She would not take it, though her eyes softened. "Later." She promised, then followed Davos down the stairwell. Brienne laid her gauntlet on Jaime's golden wrist. "You mean to go with her?" she said without asking. "A lion doesn't abandon the pride," he answered. "Whatever the Maesters find, she will need someone who remembers the warmth she once had. And if that warmth never returns," Brienne's voice cracked, "then I will sit beside her until the last ember dies." She searched his face, a storm of loyalty and sorrow warring in her blue gaze, then embraced him in an Armor Creek hug that startled them both. "May the Seven watch over you, Kingslayer." He kissed her brow and tasted salt. At Blackwater Bay the night smelled of brine, mud, and the sickly perfume of drifting wildfire residue that still clung to half-burned hulls. The docks bustled despite the hour, for every tide these weeks carried aid wagons or refugees. The Taroshi cog hired for Cersei's exile was modest, single-masted, sun-bleached saffron sails patched with green cloth. But her captain bowed so deeply his nose nearly brushed the planks when Daenerys herself came to witness departure. Drogon loomed on the quay behind her, eyeing the vessel with the wary disdain of a cat confronted by a bathtub. Cersei descended the gangplank once more, a careful bypass of barrels. She approached the Dragon Queen and curtsied, an exquisitely small gesture that years ago she might have considered beneath dignity. "Your mercy," she said. A new form of address hammered out in council to avoid calling Daenerys either Your Grace or Your Majesty, since much of Westeros still had not agreed what crown the silver-haired conqueror wore. "You will keep a healer I trust by your side," Daenerys said, meeting the blue and gold swirl that Cersei's eyes had become. "Archmaester Marwyn has studied ancient rites of ice and fire. If the frost returns, he will write to me at once. And if it consumes me, then he will send a raven and pray my dragons fly swiftly." Cersei inclined her head. "A fair covenant." Jaime emerged in traveling leathers, twin swords sheathed. Tyrion, Brienne, and Davos stood aside, watching. At the gangplanks, foot Daenerys spoke once more. "No chains bind you, Lady Cersei, but if you flee Old Town, the realm will assume your intentions sour. Remember that your reprieve is the last gift the crown can grant." "I shall remember," Cersei said. She placed a hand on Drogon's scorched scale where it jutted like black basalt. Frost steamed away under her fingers, and Drogon rumbled, wariness perhaps, or the faintest hint of acceptance. Jaime felt hairs on his neck lift. They boarded amid creak of hemp. As the cog eased from the quay, Tyrion raised a wineskin in mute salute. Cersei raised 2 fingers in return. Jaime thought he glimpsed gratitude. Brienne's silhouette remained square-shouldered until fog swallowed the ship. Only when King's Landing's lanterns dwindled to sparks did Jaime turn below deck, where Cersei sat at a tiny table lit by whale oil. She shivered. "The sea is warmer than the city, but the ghosts are everywhere." He wrapped a cloak about her shoulders. "We'll find a way." "Will we?" She flexed her pale hand over the lantern flame. The tips never reddened. "You may soon find your bedmate colder than any corpse." "I lay once with a woman who carried wildfire in her heart," he said. "Ice is the gentler burn." That almost coaxed a laugh. Instead, she reached across and squeezed his golden wrist. "Stay close. Lion of mine? The winter in me still listens for its buried king." Old Town's spires had never glittered so keenly as the morning the Taroshi cog rounded whispering sound. The Hightower's beacon burned, a slowly turning star of palest gold, but frost flecked its buttresses despite the southern latitude. Archmaester Marwyn awaited on the stone quay beside rows of novices in gray cloaks. When Cersei descended, a breeze hissed across the water, and each novice exhaled visible breath, though the day was bright. Marwyn bowed a fraction. "Lady Lannister, we have prepared an iron room shielded by dragonglass inlays. With your leave we shall begin examinations at once." His sable sleeves glittered with sewn fragments of obsidian. Jaime guided Cersei forward. As they crossed the threshold of the citadel's east gate, a hush rolled outward, as though they had entered some ancient sepulchre. The torches guttered blue for a blink. Jaime fancied the marble underfoot creaked like pond ice in thaw. Tests filled 8 days. Cuts of leech and lancet, phials of strange oils that smoked on her skin, circles of runes chanted by red priests imported from Volantis. She endured, sometimes stoic, sometimes near delirious. On the 9th dawn, Jaime standing vigil, she woke gasping and spoke in a tongue he did not know, harsh consonants, broken by vowels that cut like sleet. Frost climbed the bedposts. Marwyn burst in, scribbling even as novices scattered salt and iron filings to halt the spread. When the fit passed, she slept for a day. Jaime paced the tower's battlement until his footprints etched like runes. That night Marwyn handed him a parchment sealed with dragon wax. "The analyses confirm residual necrotic anima bound to her marrow," he said. "Think of it as a splinter of the Night King's will, trapped but not dead. Can it be removed? Perhaps, if one finds the tool that carved the original scar. My studies of pre-Andal lore speak of ice hearts, crystals hidden in the far north, older than even the first White Walkers. They resonate to their fragments, drawing them home. Remove the mother stone, and the splinters die." How far north? Beyond the shivering sea, near the Bay of Seals, there lies a range the maps call the Crown of Swords. A cave beneath the highest peak, Ulfrun's Anvil, is said to house the heart. Jaime stared. That is past the ruins of Hardhome, past even Craster's Keep. Marwyn shrugged. Salting wounds of ice demands cold travel. Jaime sealed the note and slipped it under Cersei's pillow. When she woke, he told her the gist. She listened, gathering filaments of courage to weave into the closest thing she had ever called humility. "Do you mean to drag me to the edge of the world?" she asked. He cupped her face. "I mean to ride with you while you chase the shards of your own soul." 2 weeks later, a battered galley flagged by Dragonstone colors passed through the Mander estuary to collect the unusual passengers. Sir Davos captained, for his smuggling instincts were well suited to navigating still frozen currents further north. Tyrion met them at Maidenpool, with parchments of safe conduit countersigned by the Lady of Winterfell. Sansa Stark alive after all, recovered from her brief white bondage with little worse than night terrors. Stark harvests already fail for want of heat, Tyrion warned as he clasped Jaime's arm. They pray you succeed, for the bite in the air grows sharper again. He pulled his brother aside. Aerys dreamed of wildfire cleansing. Cersei tastes cold fire within. Do not let our family become the pendulum by which kingdoms swing between extremes. Done? Jaime promised nothing except to steer with his heart. At White Harbor they found a small fellowship waiting. Sandor Clegane, swathed in bearskins. Brienne, refusing to let Jaime slip into history unseen. Ser Jorah Mormont, recovered from wounds earned fighting Wights at Winterfell. And Arya Stark, newly returned from Braavos with eyes that measured every lie before it left the tongue. She greeted Cersei with silence more fearsome than curses. "There is debt between us," Cersei acknowledged, voice low. "Why? If you wish to claim my life for your fathers, do so now." Arya studied the hint of sapphire limming Cersei's irises. "Not yet. I want to see what sort of thing you become if you win free of that ice. If I do not like it, I'll add your face to my sack." Sandor puffed a laugh. "That's mercy of a kind, lioness." Wind snapped the mooring ropes like whips as the galley departed. Northward they sailed along a coast gnawed by scoured bays and broken fishing villages, whose piers jutted like rotten teeth. Past Eastwatch by the sea, past the shadow of the wall's collapsed easternmost towers, through labyrinths of slow-grinding ice floes, where narwhals bleated beneath the hull. At every mile, Cersei felt the cold strengthen, both without and within. In her dreams, she walked crystal corridors and heard a far heartbeat, immense and terrible. The closer they drew, the faster it pulsed. Jaime woke some nights to find rime outlining her shape on the linen. He did not flinch. Once Arya saw and muttered, "Love is the strangest armor," before turning over on her pallet. When Hardhome's blackened carcass appeared on the horizon, the sea fell eerily still, as though the world itself inhaled. Skeletal masts protruded from the surf. White ships half sunk after the Night King's earlier assault years before. Gull cries sounded muffled. Snow began to fall in slow lurching flakes, the size of rose petals, each flake bearing a faint glimmer of blue deep in its core. Davos steered into a fjord where the ice teeth of the Crown of Swords reared against heavens, gone bruise purple. "Beyond here the charts are guesswork," he said. "Only wildlings ever sail this far, and they call the place Witch Frozen." Jaime, Brienne, Sandor, Arya, Jorah, and 10 Northmen disembarked with Cersei bundled like a white fox. Footing turned treacherous immediately as frost sheened every rock, but it was the sky that unnerved them. No clouds, yet a haze dulled the constellations, as though looking through frozen glass. They trekked 3 days in silence, broken only by the creak of leather and the occasional rattle of chain mail. On the second dusk, they encountered an encampment of spearwives from then, who had tracked a band of reanimated giants, rumored to haunt these passes. The spearwives shared seal meat and tales of a cavern where ice sings. Their chieftain pointed past a ridge where aurora shimmered like torn curtains, warning that those who go beneath the anvil do not emerge unchanged. Sounds familiar. Sandor muttered. The fourth morning burst upon them with no dawn, darkness simply thinned enough to show a spill of blue-white radiance flowing from the mountain's flank. The cave mouth resembled a wound. Edges glassy, exhaling mist, so cold, their tears froze before sliding. Cersei stepped first. Frost webbed from her soles, as though the path recognized her. Jaime followed, one hand on hilt. Arya and Brienne flanked with drawn blades of Valyrian steel. Sandor hefted a war-pick wrapped in dragonglass barbs. Jorah carried torches soaked in whale oil, but they sputtered low, as if light itself bent away. Inside, the tunnel narrowed then widened into a cathedral of ice columns veined with captured moonlight. Music thrummed, a resonant tone more felt in bone than heard in ear. At the chamber's center hovered a prism of pure ice the height of a man, heart of pale sapphire, suspended above a pool so black it swallowed torchglow. Specks of frost drifted upward, rather than downward, drawn to the prism like sparks to lodestone. Cersei gasped. Threads of mist spilled from her mouth and wound toward the heart. The prism pulsed. Blue veins raced under her skin, as though seeking reunion. Jaime seized her shoulders. "Break it," he barked. But Jorah's torch flickered out. All light drained into the gem, until only its inner fire illuminated the cavern. Their shadows twisted monstrous. Arya hurled a dragonglass dagger. It struck the prism, embedding without mark. The music rose, deafening. Brienne cried warning. Shapes glided from pillars, figures wrought of solid darkness rimmed in frost, tall and slender with eyes like lunar shards. Not wights, not men. Something older. Children of the frost, Jorah whispered, terror and wonder mingling. The tallest raised a hand. Sound ceased. Flickers of half-formed memories passed between creature and queen, caverns beneath Winterfell where ice merged with weirwood roots, a pact of vengeance forged when the first men burned groves and butchered saplings that could not flee. Jaime felt those images, though he knew they were for Cersei. The price of peace to come would be cut upon her own veins. She stepped nearer the prism, tears crystallizing. "I see now," she murmured. A king was made of grief. A queen must be unmade the same. She turned to Jaime, eyes no longer swirling but perfectly blue again. "One splinter is not enough," she said. "The heart feeds on all or starves. If I surrender wholly, the shard within me dissolves." Jaime's sword slid free. He set the edge to the prism, teeth clenched. "There is another way. Shatter this core." Their magic would leak into the world unfettered. Marwyn had warned in distant Old Town, like wildfire without a vault. Cersei shook her head. "Better I carry the winter into nothingness." She pressed her lips to Jaime's once, snow-cold. "My love, you gave me courage to stand trial, to voyage, to walk beyond life itself. Grant me courage once more. Let me go." "Many." He trembled until Brienne touched his gauntlet. "Sometimes honor knows mercy." She said. Jaime looked into eyes that had once sparkled with gold and pride, and found in them a serene resolve he had never dreamed Cersei could hold. "I will follow," he whispered, "in this life or the next." With her last human smile, Cersei Lannister stepped into the pool beneath the heart. Ice sealed around her ankles, knees, waist. The music swelled, then folded inward like wings closing. Light brightened until it was no longer bearable. The cavern erupted in a cascade of shards, singing, spinning, then fell silent. Where prism and pool had been, only a shallow basin of ordinary water remained, its surface steaming faintly in the bitter cold. The frost creatures kneeled, heads bowed, then faded into mist. Jaime dropped to the rim, plunging his flesh hand into the water. It was merely cold, not murderous. A single gold-green leaf drifted up, perhaps from some unseen weirwood root, offering or epitaph. He clutched it, wet face streaked with tears that did not freeze. Arya massaged her blade hilt. "The music's gone," she reported. "So's the curse, I hope." Sandor grunted, wiping his nose. Bloody hells. Let's away before the mountain decides to swallow sentimental fools. A fortnight later, as their galley rounded the northern cape, the company beheld a marvel. Sheets of ice receding in broad flows, leaving open water dark and alive. A warm wind, faint but certain, kissed their cheeks. Even the stoic Northmen cheered. By the time they reached Wight Harbor, couriers from Winterfell rode with tidings that the long-cracked weirwood sap had begun to run again, and spring buds sprouted at the margins of the new fields. At King's Landing, ravens told, the queen's breath had lifted. No more children woke with frost in their hair. Jaime stood at the bow, leaf clutched in palm. Brienne leaned beside him, sharing silent grief. He turned, surprise breaking through sorrow, when Arya knelt and drew a shallow cut across his forearm with a clean dagger. The trickle of red smoked in the chilly dawn air, but did not freeze. "You're free of her chill," Arya pronounced. "No remnant lingers in you." He met her gaze. "But her memory does." "That," Arya said, cleaning the blade, "is a frost you may keep. It never burns anyone else." Then in Tower. Back in King's Landing, Tyrion would pour 2 cups of Dornish red, and set one beside an empty seat in the solar. A private toast to a sister, at last redeemed not by crowns or cunning, but by the simplest bargain a soul can make, to surrender itself so others may wake warm. Daenerys would decree a day of remembrance, not for the Night King, nor for Cersei's crimes, but for every shard of winter buried where no sun could reach. Jon Snow, reading the proclamation at Winterfell's gate, would nod and think of a woman who died twice, so the living might breathe. And Bran, far away amid the roots of the Isle of Faces, would sigh through young leaves and know the song had turned again. Sweeter for a moment, like sap after thaw. For Jaime, the melody of that new season began as the galley's keel bit southern current, setting course toward a horizon that glimmered pink. The wind smelled of salt and cherry blossoms blown from the orchards around Maidenpool. He closed his eyes, felt the deck pitch, and heard, somewhere in the depth of memory, a phantom echo of crystal shattering, forever answered by the softest hush of petals drifting onto warm water. Oh, kai. Oh, ei. Rain drifted across the moons of the new season, in threads so fine they resembled the steam that rose from a bath, and King's Landing smelled like wet stone, fresh-turned soil, and the faintest promise of green shoots. Only 3 moons had passed since the night Jaime Lannister returned bearing news of Cersei's final sacrifice, yet the city already felt strange, as if the war-scarred alleys and soot-blackened domes had been peeled away to reveal the tender pith of a different place. Fishermen spoke of dolphins leaping again in Blackwater Bay, and in flea-bottomed children traced chalk flowers on paving stones once glazed with ice. But senseless hope can grow like a weed, and no one in the Red Keep mistook that fragile bloom for safety. Jaime rose each dawn to the clatter of scaffolds and the grunts of masons resetting fractured arches. He walked the half-finished ramparts until sweat cooled on his skin, pausing whenever he passed the spot where Cersei had stood frozen beside the Night King. The engineers meant to build a garden there, less to honor her than to banish any memory of the Iron Throne, but the space remained an empty trough filled with rainwater and broken slate. Jaime almost preferred it that way. Puddles mirrored the sky, and now and again he glimpsed a sliver of his sister's face floating on the surface, only to vanish when he blinked. One raw morning he found Daenerys Targaryen waiting near the puddle, a cloak of rough-spun gray thrown over her shoulders instead of queenly brocade. She knelt beside the water, palms flat on the stone as though listening to a hidden pulse. Her silver hair clung damp to her cheeks. "You're early," Jaime said. She glanced up. "Still, trying to understand why I keep dreaming of frost even after you carried the last shard of it north. Dreams linger." He folded arms across his cuirass, noticing how wind traced gooseflesh along the Dragon Queen's neck. "And sometimes winter nests where you least expect." Daenerys smoothed a finger over the puddle. Ripples fanned outward. "Do you miss her terribly?" Jaime had no need to ask whom she meant. "Grief is oddly quiet now, not gone but subdued. as if the woman I loved finally set down every weight she'd carried, and my own shoulders found room to breathe. She nodded, lips pressed thin. A sacrifice bought that peace. If the realm forgets, frost may find new cracks. She rose, brushed grit from her knees. The small council meets at first bell. Lord Davos says rival factions pull Lord Jon Royce and Lord Glover toward independence again. I will need your voice. You'll have it. As Daenerys strode away, a gust fluttered her cloak. Jaime spied beneath the rough-spun, a half-healed patch of skin along her collarbone, where scales of faint silver seemed etched like burned scars, a souvenir of that final duel with Viserion's corpse. She covered the mark quickly, but not before Jaime wondered whether dragons left their own lingering shards. In her case, the steel was heat, not ice, but the two were closer kin than most thought. The council chamber had been relocated to the Maester's tower, while artisans replaced the hall's stained glass windows, destroyed by Viserion's frost breath. Tyrion, seated at the narrow table's center, looked as though he hadn't slept in a fortnight, hair in damp curls, ink stains up both sleeves. At his elbow, Arya Stark perched on the arm of a chair without bothering to sit properly. She twirled a quill between nimble fingers and regarded each speaker with ferret intensity. Lord Davos occupied the northern flank beside Sansa Stark, whose auburn hair was bound by a simple leather cord rather than jewels. Opposite sat Grey Worm, silent sentinel for the unsullied, and Gendry Baratheon, furious that storms had delayed a barge of blacksmiths from the Stormlands had promised would arrive yesterday. Tyrion tapped the map. If the Vale withdraws grain levies, the Crownlands falter. If the North refuses timber, we halt rebuilding. All this over titles we've not even finished writing. Sansa's voice drifted like snow, soft yet unmistakable. The king in the North is no longer mine to name. Jon will not return from the God's Eye for moons. Until he does, the bannermen quarrel over whether the Dragon Queen rules them, or only herself. Gandaru. Jaime eyed Arya. She met his look, smirked, then said to the table, perhaps granting the North a dash of self-governance keeps swords sheathed. Gendry snorted. If they break free, the Stormlands will follow. And the Ironborn? They'd rather drown themselves than bow to dragons? And yet drown they shall, Grey Worm said, the first words he'd spoken all morning. The Queen's peace is iron. Those who test it meet spears. Daenerys entered then with that unnerving knack for timing. Peace is neither iron nor yielding straw, she said. It is a dragon's wing. Strong yet breathable. It must flex or break. She claimed the high seat, still only carved oak, not a throne. Do I force each lord to bend, then leave garrisons to keep them bent? That path ends in ashes. And if you bend first? Arya asked. Something like a smile touched Daenerys' eyes. Admiration or recognition of a fellow fighter. We meet halfway, she said. A federated realm. North and Vale share one counselor between them, as do Stormlands and Crownlands, Reach and Westerlands, Dorne and Iron Isles. 8 voices, 1 vote each. The Dragon Throne, when it is rebuilt, not cast from swords but carved of weirwood and stone. It stands neutral, an arbiter. No. Me. Davos leaned forward. A lord's moot, but for all Westeros. Bold, though maesters will faint at the parchment work. Tyrion sipped watered wine. If bold ideas were cheap, my father would have bought 1,000. The devil sits in coin. We still owe Casterly Rock's estate more dragons than Cersei's forfeiture covers, and the royal mint yearns for copper, not lofty titles. Sansa tapped the elm tabletop. The North retains gold fields no one has mined since the Andals. Grant us autonomy within Federation, and we open them under the Crown's seal, 8% tithe to King's Landing, matching the Faith's old rate. That funds both roads and this new moot. Gendry grinned despite himself. 8% of new mines outpaces any levy. Jaime watched Daenerys consider. At last she nodded. We will draft the accords. Lord Davos, ride to Sweet Robin and urge him to support Sansa's measure. Gendry, secure the Stormlands. Grey Worm, send unsullied detachments not as occupiers but as tutors. Teach village militias to drill, maintain peace. 200 per region, no more. Wow. Grey Worm bowed. Arya tossed her quill into the inkpot with a splash. Good. I hate long talks. Tyrion winked at her. Then you will loathe the drafting of charters. Not my problem. She hopped from the chair back, landing silent as a cat. I leave at dusk. Where? Several voices asked at once. South, Arya said, wiping fingers on breeches. The dawn lands whisper of corsairs gathering under a new banner. If peace is as fragile as you all think, we'll need eyes beyond maps. She gave Jaime a sideways nod, mischief bright. I sold my silence once, terrible rates. Now I sell information, don't waste it. And, like a wisp, she vanished. The months that followed proved both backbreaking and bewildering. Across the 7, soon to be 8 realms, chanceries cracked open, scribes aired parchments long forgotten, and armies of clerks marched from holdfast to holdfast, counting bushels, measuring tree trunks, asking after wells. At night, taverns hummed with talk of quotas and charters instead of battles, and the humorless jokes of bureaucrats spread like weeds. Why did the Raven ignore the rookery? Too many riders on the docket. Jaime discovered he possessed an unexpected talent for smoothing those tangles. Perhaps years of soothing Cersei's rages had taught him compromise. Perhaps grief had sanded edges from his pride. Whatever the case, a single word from the Kingslayer, once dreaded, now eased quarrels between half-feral Vale miners and Brotherhood-loyal Crownlanders. Folks listened because his name still tasted of blood and redemption in equal measure. Brienne stayed in the city at first, commanding the reconstituted City Watch, while Lord Commander of the Kingsguard Sir Barristan Selmy, long thought dead in exile, returned from Bravos at Daenerys' invitation to take a seat again, older, but his honor unweathered. He accepted Brienne's interim leadership with a knight's grace. Some nights Jaime and Brienne lingered on the tower terrace reviewing patrol ledgers, until owls hooted in the Godswood courts. Their friendship grew easy, though a fragile hush sometimes fell whenever Brienne's gloved fingers brushed the gold of Jaime's prosthesis. Neither knew how to name what else might bloom inside that hush, and both were wary of trying. One midnight, as bells tolled second watch, Brienne arrived on the terrace breathless. A raven from Darren's watch, she said, handing Jaime the scroll. Sealed not with wax, but with a smear of tar. He cracked it. The message was short. Ironborn longships slipped the straits, he read aloud. Black sails at the Broken Arm, reaving small villages. The corsairs fly the Kraken Eye. He frowned. Kraken Eye, Euron's symbol. But Euron Greyjoy died at Dragonstone, Brienne said, crossing arms hard enough to pinch mail. His body never surfaced. Jaime stared into the lamplight. If Euron lives, he'll unite every sea bastard who sniffed weakness in the realm. We can't afford a naval war while we patch fields. They rushed to the council chamber where Tyrion and Davos were poring over grain accounts. Within an hour, Grey Worm had assigned a swift Drummond squadron to pursue the Reavers, but Tyrion's brow furrowed at the margins of trade routes. Even if we chase them off, he said. Ships reported in Stepstones vanish. Something steers the pirates with uncanny precision. He flicked the raven scroll. I sent a plan too neat for Euron's chaos. Daenerys, summoned from a restless sleep, studied the complaint. Arya's note spoke of corsairs as well. Jaime blinked. She's not returned. Not. A whisper. The Queen's voice carried something rarely heard. Worry. If she met these Ironborn, perhaps she shadowed them deeper. Grey Worm fetched fresh ink. We sail east by morning tide. Unsullied crew, no heavy catapults. Rhaegal and Drogon flank. No, Daenerys said. Dragons will hold the coast. If the pirates wield scorpions seized from Cersei's arsenal, I won't risk them on narrow seas. Jaime tightened his sword belt. Then I sail with Davos. If Euron breathes, A Lannister must face what my house once empowered. Tyrion exhaled. Ace your brother, and your hand I object. Ace the man who torched the fleet at Blackwater you would, Jaime answered, half teasing. But consider politics. Rumors already accuse the crown of strangling dissent. If sea raids persist, the storm lands rebel next. Better my head on the bow than yours behind a desk. At first bell, the Drummond storm's valor, daughter's fury, an easterly wind slipped from Blackwater rush under low gray clouds. Davos stood at the aft rail of valor, hair whipping in salt gusts, Jaime beside him adjusting to the pitch. The masts still smelled of fresh-cut oak. King's Landing had rebuilt them quickly from reach timber, and the bright seams in the hull glistened with tar like healing scars. By sundown the fleet rounded Massey's Hook. Gulls wheeled overhead until shadow swallowed shorelines. Stars pricked into view, but clouds soon smothered them, and wine began to mutter in the rigging. Jaime had sailed before, Castle to King's Landing tours on pleasure cogs, nothing like the raw hush of night unknown. He clung to the rail, golden fingers numb in spray. Davos, ever cheerful despite weather, whistled an old Myrish shanty. If Euron stalks these channels, he picks a foul wind indeed. No wind favors the wicked, Jaime said. That's where you're wrong. Davos pointed to the moonless dark. Sometimes wicked men ride storms while good drown. Ask the sea. She answers with old bones. They sighted the first wreck at dawn. A fishing cog from Duskendale. Charred mast, snapped, hull pierced by iron spikes, shaped like kraken hooks. No bodies bobbed nearby, but bits of net tangled the prow, and dried blood spattered the deck in spiral patterns, as though some ritual had accompanied slaughter. The crew of Daughter's Fury lowered a skiff. Jaime and Davos climbed down. Jaime crouched beside one of the spirals, touched the congealed smear. Drawn carefully, almost like runes. Davos scowled. Never saw Ironborn bother with glyphs. They kill, they pillage, they sail. They pried open a hatch to the hold. Rats scurried. Barrels of cod lay split. Beneath the fish, a single corpse rested. A bald man, arms bound with rope, skin painted blue and white stripes. His eyes were sewn shut by pale twine. Whoever he was, they wanted him blind, Jaime muttered. And fish to rot his secrets, Davos added. When they returned to Valor, a gale began building from east to west, unnatural in its abruptness. Rain lashed the sails. The lookout cried sail shapes at starboard. 2, then 5, then a dozen black silhouettes surging between white-capped peaks. Jaime raised his spyglass. The prows bore the Kraken sigil, but merged with a second emblem. A painted eye ringed in stylized flames, very like the one splashed in blood on the Cogue's deck. He recognized the eye from ancient Braavosi coinage, Morgoth's motley, a centuries-dead heretic sect that preached fire purity through drowning. Ironborn with zealot sails, he growled. Euron never lacked imagination. Horns trumpeted. The Drommonds angled to intercept, but the pirates threw chains with grapples tipped in dragon glass. One chain snagged the Valor's mizzen boom. Jaime's sword flashed. He hacked at the chain, golden fingers gripping the hilt while real hand braced. Sparks flew, useless. Pirates poured over the bulwark. These were not ironclad raiders of old. They wore patchwork robes dyed rust red, lips tattooed black, half-mad chants spilling forth. Jaime parried a hooked blade, drove pommel into a bald zealot's eye, felt the skull crack. Another swung a censer smoking with resin. The scent made his head swim with images of cold corridors. He shoved the censer man into the sea. Davos dueled a towering corsair wielding twin pickaxes. The Onion Knight ducked, jabbed, drew blood that steamed bright red even in rain. "They're half-wildling," Davos shouted. Storm's valor heaved. A pirate standard unfurled above. The kraken eye wreathed by 2 ashen dragons biting their tails. Jaime's stomach dropped, an unmistakable message of revenge. Lightning split the sky. No mere flash, but a sustained serpent of white that kissed the Valor's mainmast and sheared it clean in a roar of flame. Sailcloth ignited, yet rain doused embers before fire could spread. Jamie heard a voice drift across waves, amplified by some monstrous horn. "Blood for the drowned Dawn." Atop the leading pirate ship stood a figure clad in scaled leather, hair whipping like raven pennons, a patch of black iron sealing one eye. Euron Greyjoy grinned, teeth lantern bright. He raised a gauntleted fist. At the gesture, two oddities emerged onto his deck, a pair of pale women whose throats bore swirling ice-blue tattoos, eyes shining same unnatural hue. In their arms rested orbs of flecked crystal, fragments of the same sorcery once housed in the Night King's spear. "The bastards scavenged shards of the Night Court," Jamie spat, parrying another zealot. "Those women are ice priests." Davos slashed free ropes. "We're dead if they utter their magic." But before the women could chant, a monstrous cry shook heavens. Drogon. The black dragon tore through cloud, flame roaring in his gullet, Rhaegal close behind. Greyjoy's grinning expression faltered as firelight washed the deck. Jamie shouted to his crew, "Down!" They hit planks. A torrent of dragon flame incinerated the pirate flagship's forecastle. Sailors leaped screaming. Rhaegal followed, flame gold green, bathing the ship's aft. Flames met the crystal orbs. A detonation of steam and frost erupted, showering shards that hissed and melted the rain. Greyjoy vanished amid smoke. Euron always had the instincts of a cockroach. Drogon wheeled. The pirate formation broke, some vessels ramming each other in panic. Yet one smaller caravel sped past the carnage. Sails snapped taut by unnatural wind. A single figure clung to the stern rail, Arya Stark, hair plastered, eyes dark with fury. She leapt as Drogon descended, catching a rigging line lowered by Daenerys, and swung onto the dragon's neck behind the queen. Jaime's sigh of relief turned to alarm when Arya signaled him with a gesture he recalled from Winterfell drills. "Regroup east, threat not dead." He scanned the pirate wreck. The two ice priests lay vaporized, but no sign of Euron's body. Back at King's Landing, the battered Dromans limped through the river mouth. Black sails smoldered behind them. Dockworkers lined the quays, cheering victory. Yet, in the war room, Arya's report spread frost over every smile. "Euron commands not just Ironborn," she said, cloth drying her hair. "A cult of drowned fire. Men who believe frost cleanses flesh, but flame redeems spirit. They scour ruins looking for ice relics. I infiltrated weeks ago. The shards they carry weeks ago. The shards they carry will, if gathered, forge a lens to channel cold fire great enough to freeze entire port." Tyrion feigned calm. "How many shards?" "7 at least. 2 we destroyed today. 5 remain." She threw a pouch on the table. Inside tinkled flecks of scorched crystal. "But they seek the greatest peace, the Night King's crown." Jaime's breath stopped. "The crown shattered when we struck him." "Not entirely," Arya said. A chunk the size of a man's skull sank into Blackwater Bay's mud. "Euron has divers scraping the harbor." Daenerys rose, cloak rustling. "Then we dredge first." Thus began the drowned hunt. Teams of divers in crude wicker helmets filled with Bel Air combed Blackwater's silt day and night. Rhaegal hovered to scorch any sharks drawn by blood. Fleets blockaded the bay mouth. Tyrion requisitioned half the city's winches. Weeks passed, nets hauling little but old anchors, rusted chains, and bones of sailors lost in Robert's rebellion. The crown remained elusive. Then, on the 16th day, a boy scourer from Flea Bottom surfaced squealing through cracked lips, clutching a black lump crusted in barnacles. Maesters painstakingly cleaned it, a jagged circlet of frozen metal pulses, each point tipped with ice glass fragments still alive, sapping heat from bare fingers. They sealed it in dragonglass casket and carried it to the Red Keep cellars. Jaime insisted on standing watch with Brienne. "No one touches it," he told guards. "If Euron's men breach the city, drown us before letting them near." Day after day, no breach came. But ravens delivered grim tidings. Long ships swarmed Tyrosh and Lees, freezing waterfronts and crescents. Stepstone strongholds found their wells turned to solid columns overnight. Some nights, the sea beyond Dragonstone steamed under moonlight, as though boiled from beneath. Reports spoke of a great pyre on the deck of a ship, shaped like a kraken's skull, where Euron sacrificed captives, using shards to extract frost before plunging bodies into flame. On the 21st night, the palace bells pealed thrice, the signal for infiltration. Jaime and Brienne dashed to the crown vault. Two unsullied lay dead outside, skulls split, throats slick with black blood turning to ice. The iron door hung open. Inside, candles guttered but revealed only emptiness. The casket was gone. They followed bloody footprints up winding service stairs into the half-rebuilt Dragon Cathedral at the Red Keep's summit. Wind moaned through broken arches. Atop scaffold stood Euron, cloak of flayed sails billowing, crown held aloft in both hands. Half his face was blistered from dragon flame. The eye patch had melted into scar tissue. Yet he looked intoxicated as a zealot glimpsing paradise. Below, on mosaic floor, knelt 3 robed acolytes, chanting guttural prayers. Between them crouched a girl no older than 8, ropes cutting wrists. Tears froze on her cheeks. Greyjoy placed the crown upon her head. The ice tips bit, blood beating tiny rubies. A blue glow ignited, racing veins down the girl's throat. Jaime charged up scaffolding. Brienne hammered acolytes aside, freeing the child. But the ritual had begun. Shards hummed like hornets, drawing power from the very air. Frost spidered along wooden beams. "Too late, Kingslayer," Euron laughed, voice ragged. "A new Night Queen rises, loyal not to death, but to me." Jaime slashed. Euron parried with cutlass of black steel. Their duel circled the scaffolds, sparks raining. Below, Brienne cradled the girl while Bronn, summoned by alarm, dispatched the last acolyte with a crossbow bolt through ear. Wind howled. Frost thickened. Euron pressed, eyes wild. "Do you smell her?" He jerked chin at the air. "Cersei's ghost rides every gust. She sings to me in the dark. Jaime, join her." Jaime bristled, struck so hard sparks showered. "You dare speak her name." Sudden heat burst overhead. Drogon's roar. The dragon perched atop the shattered dome, Daenerys astride, flame-licking gums. But Drogon hesitated. The crown throbbed in resonance, dredging a cold that repulsed flame. Daenerys leaned forward, inner conflict twisting her brow. Fear of harming the child, need to end the threat. Jaime feinted, then kicked Euron's injured knee. Greyjoy staggered. Bronn from below threw a dagger. It spun end over end, catching Euron in the bicep. Blood spurted. He screamed, lost grip of the cutlass. Jaime seized him, slammed his golden hand into Euron's jaw, and shoved. The scaffold rail broke. Euron tumbled 3 stories, landed with sick crunch among rubble of stained glass. His breath rattled, but did not cease. Ice still whirled round the crown. Jaime knelt beside the fainting girl, whose eyes flickered between blue and hazel. Brienne whispered comfort, but Frost licked her gauntlet. "Remove it," Jaime told Daenerys. "Drogon can melt what's left. Not without killing her." Daenerys dismounted, robes whipping. She placed bare palm to the crown's rim. A hiss rose, smoke curled. Ice fought fire. Daenerys bore into the girl's gaze. "Listen, little one. Let go. Don't let him hold you." The child shuddered. Jaime saw Cersei for a heartbeat. That moment her will shattered the Night King's grip. "Let go," he echoed. A sound like shattering crystal rang. The crown cracked, splitting into 13 pieces that clattered over tile. Grey ice died at once. The girl sagged into Brienne's arms, breathing. Drogon inhaled flame. Daenerys shook her head. "No. Give them to the deep." The next dawn, 13 fragments weighted in lead caskets sank into the narrow sea at a point charted but never marked. The ships sailed on. No one spoke until the splashes faded. Back in King's Landing, Euron, clinging to life, was dragged in chains before the Queen. He laughed even then. The sea takes us all in the end. You can't drown a kraken. Daenerys regarded him as one might regard a lure that had caught but refused to die. Perhaps not, she said. But we can teach the sea to forget. She ordered him cast into a cage of corroded iron hung beneath the harbor's low tide line. Twice a day, the tide submerged him. Twice a day, he rose choking. He lasted 6 days before salt and barnacles ended the tale. The cage remained, a warning to zealots who would court frost and flame both. 6 moons later, the realm's moot convened beneath the charred rafters of the Sept of Baelor. Now open to the sky, but adorned with hanging gardens, climbing rope lattices, where stained glass once shimmered. Lords and ladies assembled on wooden benches, sprouting between herbs. Tyrion's charter passed after 3 days of debate. The North and the Vale jointly elected Sansa Princess Paramount of Snowstone, seat straddling old border forts. The Reach allied with Westerlands under an accord of commerce. Dorne and the Iron Isles forged an improbable pact to patrol summer seas. Each pair gained 1 vote. The Dragon Queen's voice counted only if a tie demanded weight. When the final signatures dried, Daenerys rose. This garden grows because the dead taught us fear, and the living taught us sacrifice. She glanced at Jaime. One woman gave Winter's life to bury Winter's curse. We owe her memory, not with statues, but with stewardship. She raised a goblet. To Cersei of House Lannister, cleansed in frost yet remembered in spring. Goblets lifted, some with reluctance, most with solemn respect. Jaime closed his eyes after the toast, feeling warmth behind lids. When he opened them, he found Brienne's hand on his real hand. She squeezed. No words needed. Outside, as the moot dispersed, Arya slid from a shadow carrying a new pouch of intel. Stepstones calm, she reported. But talk drifts of an island further east where men melt ice shards into glass arrows. Might be nothing. Tyrion pinched bridge of nose. In my experience, nothing enjoys dressing up as catastrophe. Arya shrugged. Well, I'm restless. She spotted Gendry across the square. I promised I'd visit Storm's End. Fancy a ride? He grinned, hooked his arm, and they strode off. Jaime gazed after them, turning leaf green in spring sun. The world keeps spinning, he murmured. Brienne answered, sometimes toward the light. He let that settle. Then, mindful of frost and flame, crowns and cinders, he offered to escort her to the castle gardens, where new saplings bent in bright afternoon wind. They walked side by side. Behind them, the city exhaled, warmer than it had been in years, though still etched with scars that would never fully fade. And somewhere high above, a hawk circled on rising thermals, its shadow crossing over newly laid banners that fluttered not in conquest but in cautious truce, emblems stitched from lion gold, wolf gray, dragon crimson, sun spear copper, and kraken black, each threaded into a single ribbon that snapped clean and hopeful beneath the blue spring sky.